episode of On Location with Zara Durrani, produced with the support of TELUS STORYHIVE. Happy New Year to all those who are watching, who continue to watch us. And I'm so excited to bring local stories, local artists, entrepreneurs, athletes on the show who are here to not just inspire me, but hopefully you guys as well. Joining me is someone who I've known for some time. I was part of this event, this conference, almost a decade ago, and when I heard him, along with his wife, speak on stage, I found their story very fascinating, and it's been truly amazing witnessing his story evolve. They moved countries, he's authored a book, he is an entrepreneur, he is a life architect, he's spoken on many stages, he's been on over 300 plus podcasts. WTF? See, I can say that without saying and you may have seen him on television, in newspapers, magazines, talking about fitness, his passion for being an entrepreneur, and his aim is to inspire over 100 million individuals.
1 million role models.
1 million role models.
There you go.
1 million role models. See, I was trying to memorize it. We're almost there. I'm talking about my neighbor and none other than Dai Manuel. Dai, where does that name come from?
Oh, I know,
This is
right?
so
It's
unique.
weird.
What does it mean? What does Dai mean?
So Dai is a Welsh name, and
Okay.
it means David.
Okay.
So like if you were ever over in Wales, and you look at their signs there, well, one, good luck to try to even read it. Like there's all these consonants, right? But David, the way they say it is actually spelled with a lot of extra letters, but when they shorten it up, it's shortened it to Dai. Sort of like Robert and Bob.
Well, it's a
You know?
very unique name.
Yeah.
It's certainly a name for like a TEDx speaker.
Oh, there.
It's a very great name for a personality and an entrepreneur, someone like you. You know, it's truly amazing. As soon as I open the door to welcome Dai, he brings this great sunny energy. You know, you bring amazing energy to any room. I've seen you on stage and, you know, seeing you guys just through periphery, through social media, seeing your journey, your family. And I mentioned this to you over the phone call, over our Zoom call earlier last week, was I love the fact your Instagram bio says, dating my wife. Like, I just love that.
Intentionality.
Yes, I love that. So let's dig deep. I feel like we have so many different, yes, we're digging deep. We're swimming in the deep end. So I know you shared a little bit about your beginnings, and if you feel comfortable sharing that with our audience, because they'll find it truly fascinating. You know, when you were growing up and you were a teenager, things looked a little bit different.
Very different. Yeah, you know, it's like a lot of us, we deal with certain challenges growing up, but you know, most of it builds our character, builds us into who we are. But every once in a while, we have some fairly traumatic events, and those traumatic events can also influence our upbringing, our perspective on the world, our perspective on ourselves. And sure enough, you know, at age 9, my parents pulled my brother and I in after school one day, and it was kind of weird because we got home and my dad's car was in the driveway. And I'm like, why's Dad home? Dad was never home that early, you know, because he's always working. And sure enough, he was already home after school. And they whisked us into the living room, sat us down on the couch, much like this. Not as pink, this is much nicer. But they sat us down on the couch. And then they proceeded to let us know, my brother and I, that they would be separating and divorcing. And, you know, at age 9, I thought my life was perfect. I mean, that's what most kids think, right? At least we hope. They feel like life is just getting started and things are great. And sure enough, they weren't. And I didn't handle it very well, because also I'm an 80s kid. So growing up in the 80s, dating myself right now was probably about 84, 85 when this all transpired. We didn't have an internet. There's no resources for kids of divorced families, because also divorces were still heavily stigmatized. Anyways, long and short of it all, it set me on a bit of a 5-year, well, let's just call it a bit of a spiral, where I learned to deal with my emotions and my stress, my anxiety, with food, video games, and movies. Do the math. If that's my lifestyle most of the time, and I'm not eating like, hey, pass more salad, Zara. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, yeah, pass me more chips, you know, more ice cream. Like, I was eating foods very rich in calories but poor in nutrition value. And after 5 years, I was morbidly obese. Very large kid. at 15 years old. And
like weighing approximately how much? Like 4 hours?
well, they put into BMI. I had a BMI in the 40s. Okay, and so for those that are familiar with body mass index, like I'm, it's kind of funny now because I like to let people know I'm 210 pounds now, 6'1". Back then I would have been about 230, but also probably about 5 inches shorter. But the composition changed. Because I do based on BMI. BMI thinks I'm overweight right now. I'm not overweight right now, but you know, body mass index is a bit outdated. But most people understand it. Either way, I was in a high risk class, and a lot of health complications due to that, but especially the mental health. You know, walking into a room and I could see people turn their heads and then turn back to each other, snicker, point. Kids were the worst. I mean,
school is tough, especially back then. I mean, it's tough even now, but back then even tougher. So share with us the process and journey of discovering and looking at you now, like when you shared that with me the other day. And what I also found very truly inspiring was listening to your TEDx talk, because that part of your journey I wasn't really aware of, or perhaps you shared like over a decade ago. But you know, just how first of all, like owning the stage, like you know, you're a dad, you're a husband, you're an entrepreneur. You were the co-founder of this amazing company. You're speaking on many stages and sharing your truth. And I'm sure it's very healing for men to hear. Not just men, but everyone to hear. But I find for other men to hear you sharing so fearlessly and so openly and so vulnerably your journey. And that's why I thought you'd make such an amazing guest for us. Because I'm sure that our audience, you know, the new year starts and we're all like, goals and fitness and wellness, but I want to talk about fitness, wellness, and goals as a lifestyle, because that's something you help people with. But going back to you know, that kid, and then shifting gears, how did you get into fitness, and where did this shift happen that I'm going to change? And it's not only going to change my body, but how I think and how I manifest my reality. Because those are things now you teach other people.
Okay, so it's funny, I see your book there, Mirror Work. Okay, but I was going to say mirrors are very powerful tools. You know, like you can't help it. When you stare at yourself in the mirror, there's a lot of thoughts that come up, a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions. And I remember at age 15 being at my father's home, and we would see him every other weekend. And so we were at his place that weekend, and it's Saturday morning, and you know, he always gets my brother and I to have a shower in the morning, and then we'd go out and enjoy our day. And sure enough, you know, I was getting rushed that morning because we had to get somewhere. I had no idea where we were going now, so long ago. But I know he was rushing us. And so I'm having my shower, and I used to have this cool little trick I would do in the shower where I knew if I put the water up really hot, it would create a lot of condensation. And so by the time I would exit the shower, the mirror would be covered in condensation. And that was my little hack, so I would not have to look at myself while I was toweling off. You know, like that was to the extreme of which I would go. And even back then, there's only a couple images remaining of me that actually show my state of unhealth. And I got to a place where I was just, I needed to make a change, you know? Yeah,
I'm just gonna, I have to, Julian, can you mark this time? Mark this time right now. Mark this time. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
My cat, you guys. Okay, you cannot get sick. It's my fault.
I love to explore.
No, I mean, this doesn't need to go on because she's not. I'm going to eat it anyways because I don't really care. Sorry, guys. Cat.
Oh, it's okay.
Cat. Yeah, I did the same thing again. I took it off super quick. Sorry, Julian. Okay. Here we go. We're having fun. We're having fun. Okay, we're good? Good.
Oh, that's great. It's great.
Okay. It's an animal sanctuary, you know.
It
That's what one of my friends was saying the other day. It's like, this may sound so funny. So both my dog and my cat, you know, they both look like brother and sister, pink noses, paws,
Okay,
and
yeah.
and now I was like looking at goats. I'm like, goats are so cute. I would need a house. I would need a property, and I'm just like,
wow.
oh, I love
That, now
animals.
that's really Animal Farm now. You're expanding. That's pretty good.
Yeah, sorry to
No,
stop here.
okay.
I looked over and she was going
I just got it in front of my eye too. I was like,
what is happening?
she's gonna fill her boots.
So let's backtrack a little bit. You know, that's truly inspiring what you were mentioning about the mirror. And I've had moments like those. I didn't do something like that, but feeling sadness and pain inside, and then also not knowing, like, you know, of course for boys it's different. Culturally, like, I feel what I learned growing up was you don't share your stuff with people. You know, you just smile and you pretend everything is okay. You don't share about your family, and even within the family you don't talk about stuff. So I remember I had a few times, and I didn't really do my BMI or anything in Pakistan because that's where I grew up, but just eating a lot of roti, which is, you know, like naan.
So good though.
Yeah, it's so good. Like, especially when it's homemade and you're making the dough yourself and doing everything yourself, you know what you're making. But and that with butter and food, and that was just a way of, like, I'm sitting here and I'm just eating, and I could just eat 3 of those, and even and just like not even feeling what's going in, but just eating. And so I can thank you so much for sharing that. And then you were saying that with your dad and the separation and how that was affecting you. So what was the moment that the shift happened?
Well, looking at the mirror that morning, and it was just interesting that it was that fateful morning, but something in me just sort of welled up because I got out of the shower. It wasn't fogged up because I was being rushed by my dad. So I'd come out and I'm like, oh man, the hack didn't work. And I'm toweling off, and I can see in the peripheral, I can see my shape, you know, and for some reason I turned and I locked eyes with myself, and you know, and here I am toweling off. By the time I toweled off, I had to towel off a second time because it was like Niagara Falls, right? And I was just like uncontrollable sobbing. And you know what the ugly cry looks like, you know, it's like just where you lose control of everything. And
up until then, you had completely avoided looking at yourself.
Oh yeah, like there wasn't any photos. I was 15, yeah, just nearly 15. And it was challenging because that morning I decided to look at myself. And I did the gaze down and up, and I, you know, that cry was so cathartic though. Like it was such a release. And it was in that moment I started, you know, having these visions of life. You know, I was 15 in this high school where I was, you know, I was in the junior grade, but you had the counselors to start talking about, what do you want to do when you graduate? You know, so all these conversations are fresh, and I'm like, I can't even think about next week, let alone next year or a few years from now. But then I started to think, the things that I've been doing the last 5 years brought me to that moment. And if I was really honest with myself, and I asked myself, well, if I keep doing what I'm doing in the next 5 years, am I going to end up in a better place? And you know, it's not rocket science.
That's a lot for a kid that age to be thinking. And I mean,
it is, but it isn't.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I bring this up because I think we all have that ability to start to visualize and dream and have visions of what we want our future to look like. And so I didn't do a lot of that. I might think professionally certain things I wanted to do, but when I actually started to think about my future from my own physical standpoint, my well-being standpoint, I was just in complete clarity in that moment. I was like, no. If I keep doing this, it's not going to be better. And in fact, I made my shift originally based on fear. I was more afraid of not changing than the idea of changing. And it's amazing how we get to that place of fear, right? We get to a place where we're more afraid of not doing the thing than the thing itself.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, it was not getting healthy. I was afraid of that potential future. So I didn't know what to do.
And then liking the person who you're seeing, whether that's just based on the physical.
Well, at 15, that's all I knew.
Yeah.
You know?
And I know for me, it's like when the shift happened, I think it was kind of similar. It wasn't like big difference, but I started looking at what am I eating? Why am I doing this? But the whole thing of feeling, the fact that as a 15-year-old boy, you were able to feel those feelings, I don't think I gave myself permission to when I was going through that. That came much later through voice work, like in an acting program and breathing, and through going to Bali and being in a village. And you know, everyone's like, you went to Ubud. I was like, no, I was in a village, like close to Mount Ikung, like, you know, snakes and geckos and lizards, and the Balinese houses where bats come at 3:30 in the morning to wake you up. That's a different reality.
It is.
And you know, you don't need an alarm clock. Bats are coming in to wake you up in the morning.
And roosters, lots of roosters.
And a lot of it, I feel, is like giving yourself permission. Like for me, it was a lot about feeling. Like I was escaping my feelings.
Sure, yeah.
You know, for so long.
That's what a lot of us do.
Yeah.
We have certain, we'll call them habits or rituals that we do to sort of avoid pain, avoid the truth, avoid the reality of the situation. And you know, as much as I started to move away from food, I started to educate myself. I was like, I remember telling my kids this. I'm like, I went to the library, I got books out. The kids are like, why don't you just Google it, Dad? I'm like, I'm older than Google. You know, so there you go. But you know, I brought those books home on fitness and nutrition. I just started to educate myself. Because through education, we gain confidence because of the clarity that we get. And I still wasn't 100% sure what to do, but I remembered I used to love riding my bike when I was younger. And I remember saying to my dad that day, like, he saw something in me, and I have to give him credit, you know, because he saw something in me that day. I came to him saying, I want to get healthy, Dad. I don't want to be like this anymore. And he's like, what can we do? You know, like, he was really encouraging, because up to that point they'd offered to help, but every time someone came to me asking for help, I was like, you don't think I'm good enough the way I am. That's why you think I need to change.
Yeah, because you think of the inner shame and stuff versus asking for help and taking that step on acceptance. There's something here I need to work on. And I'm sure that this story and being in touch with your own inner, like that fear of that teenager and the shame or the helplessness, or you know, your family, the idea of like what a family should look like.
Sure, yeah.
I'm sure those are the principles you've used in your own personal life when you're coaching and helping people today.
Later on, yeah. Like at that time, you have to understand too, I was 17, and people would often say, hey, what's your motivation? And sure, if we talk about motivation, there's intrinsics, or the thing that drives us internally, you know, self-motivates us. And then there's extrinsics, so those things that are outside of us that we use for motivation. And extrinsically speaking, I just wanted a girlfriend.
Be honest, dude.
Full disclosure, no. But deep down, you know, what I was saying there too was I wanted somebody to want me. You know, and I wanted that romantic connection.
Yeah, love.
You know, like I did, absolutely. And so it set out on this journey. Now, as much as it took me 5.5 years to put all that weight on, when I made the mental shift and started doing things differently, it started to make results right away. And it took 20 months to release the weight. 20 months, so over 1.5 years. But that's so small comparatively to how long it took me to get to that place of unhealth. And I like people to keep aware of that, is that, you know, especially with health changes, as soon as you start doing a different activity, it's amazing how quickly your body will thank you. Especially with nutrition, right? I mean, you eat something really sugary, really carby, very refined sugars, you know, high on the glycemic index, meaning that it spikes your blood sugar levels. Sure, it might make you feel really good in the moment, but, you know, 30 minutes later, you're like, oh, I need a nap, or I need another one of those sugary treats, right? And so we find ourselves in those cycles, but then you eat something healthy, something whole food, you know? Like those great cookies Danny brought, right? Like they're breakfast cookies, like they're very wholesome. Lots of organic materials in there, whole foods.
And you're full for longer. You're not craving the muffin from or croissant, because I'm guilty for that. You know, something that shifted for me, like back in the day, I used to be like, oh yes, I'm gonna get on this fitness thing January or whatever. Versus now it's you know, I'm 41, I'll be 42 in a couple of months. And
yay, 40s.
Yeah, honestly, best time.
Awesome.
It truly is. I feel more me if I look at a picture of me in my 20s, and no joke, like I won't toot my own horn, but like there are people who say to me, they're like, you look younger now than in your 20s. And I think part of that is self-love and inner like peace, that connection and making space to like be for the feelings, to feel those things. And so I was listening to all these podcasts, including like, you know, Andy Frisella, and I'm making it 75 soft. I was going for the 75 hard there for a second. But I'm like, I already walk quite a bit, and I understand, you know, he was almost like 300 pounds, and then, you know, it's like a different journey than mine. And I think as a female too, it's like I have to listen to my body. But also Tony Robbins' words of change your state. And you know, when you're self-employed, when you're an artist, you're performing, you're giving out, and one contract's going, one's ending, and something you don't get or whatever. And a lot of the game is the inner game.
Yes, correct.
And you know, you can put on the nice clothes, the makeup, the whole 9 yards, but how you show up, it's the energy. Like I was saying, when I opened the door, you were like, I'm like, oh wow, you know. A lot of times, like, I show up in an interview, of course, as myself, but when someone is giving me all that energy, I'm gonna be like, yes, like, let's go. And when my anxiety or my fear or whatever kind of negative self-talk would come up, I'm like, I'm gonna do something crazy, like jump into the water when it's -12 outside and snow on the beach, you know, and like change the state, or I climb up 50 floors. And, you know, it's like doing things that I'm going into the pain. Like going into the pain, you know, into the fear, so this stops. I feel like for me now, workout has become so much about the
mental.
Yes.
Yeah. That's. I'm glad that you're aware of that, and I think it depends on where we're at in our journeys. You know, with connecting our physical health with our emotional health, our spiritual health. You know, there's so many aspects that make us healthy, you know, and I love that we're talking about mental health now. We're talking about spiritual health, financial health, you know, emotional health, physical health. Like, it's not just one conversation. We're talking about it all now. Because it's trying to find harmony, not balance. I hear the term balance all the time.
What is the difference? Tell us
well,
about that.
Think about it this way.
I know I'm talking all the time, like, balance, but then I also feel some shame around.
I used to say that all the time, but I struggled. The more I looked for balance, it was like I was searching for this. I don't know. I felt like Neverland, you know, Peter Pan. I'm like, just keep going that direction. You'll eventually find it. And I'm like, I never found balance ever. Because as soon as you start looking at one thing, what am I looking at now? Nothing. We don't have eyes in the back of our head. So if you just think about the idea of focusing your attention, and remember what Tony Robbins says, where our attention goes, our energy flows. So you can only pay attention to one thing at a time. I mean, and I'm a man and I accept that, okay? So my wife, she does tell me she's got mad skills and can do multiple things. And I still question that, but hey, teach their own. I know I can't do more than one thing. But here's the idea, harmony. Think about a symphony. You could have one drum beat just go in there, and you throw in some strings, you know, you start throwing in a couple other instruments, you know, next thing you know, you got a whole symphony going. But it has to be harmonious. You got one guy going on a completely different beat, it's not going to sound right. You will notice that there's something off. And I think in our own lives, we know when we lose harmony in an area in life, right? Because I think we're always striving to find that harmony. And so that's sort of how I like to invite people to do it, because I know how frustrating it can be to seek balance. You know, I often refer to the struggle with the juggle of life, right? Like, that's life. We choose to put a lot of balls in the air. And you know, we'll get to a place where it's like, well, I got 6, can I do one more? Maybe I can do one more, you know? And inevitably we hit a place where, and I think you brought it up today, you know, that self-care element, self-love, if you will. Do you love yourself enough to prioritize some time every day for you? Because no one else is going to do it for you.
100%. And you can be making the bucks, you can be doing the travels and like living. And I know I went through that last year, and I will talk about it now, honestly. It's like I was getting so sick, Dai. And My friends were like, Zara, every couple of weeks you're sick. Because my immune system was, you know, I don't drink, I don't smoke, but I was drinking a lot of coffee and going for the croissant or the happy hour pizza and, you know, fried food and things that were making me feel good. When you would see me, you're like, yeah, she's like small and whatever. But in terms of what I was putting inside of my body and not really making time because I was just run down, you know. But I know now that whether it is just a little bit of stretching or taking a little bit of moment or going for that hike or doing those things, the wonders they do for my mental, physical, and emotional health. So then when I show up, I'm on, not just on camera, but like afterwards in my life as well. Like not just when you're on stage, but it's like, how is your energy level, you know, throughout the week? Because it's easy to perform when you have 5,000, 10,000 people, they're giving you all this energy, and you take that coffee or espresso and you're like, let's go. So that's a balance, like, you know, that that's the harmony. The harmony, you see, that I'm working on and probably can learn from individuals like yourself. So you got into, now your book was, and we'll backtrack a bit more from the book, because you were the co-founder of this
Fitness Town,
a
fitness equipment retailer,
Yeah.
And it went great. And you know, I want to be transparent. So if people do watch the TEDx talk, I talk about another story that sort of transpired in my early 30s. And because as much as I moved away from food, right, I got healthy. I started to move my body with purpose. I started to change how I nourished myself. Physically, I changed.
In confidence.
Yeah, and all that started to come with it, but I didn't make any internal changes. Again, I'm 17 years old, right? And I'm just motivated for a girlfriend, you know. But then all of a sudden I started to get attention. I remember going to a party and being given my first drink. And then I had another one.
You were 17.
I was 17, yeah. And then I was like, oh, I feel pretty good. You know, I feel pretty different. Man, there's those girls over there. Oh, you know, I'm going to go talk to them.
Yeah,
you know?
doesn't have that power.
And then there was these guys standing around, sort of, and I didn't know them. They're from a different school. You know, we're at one of those high school parties, and I went up and just started connecting with them. And this is stuff I never did. And all of a sudden, they were connecting back. We were having dialogue. We were connecting. We were laughing. There was an energy exchange, and I felt really good. I felt like I was accepted. I was part of the clique, you know.
Yeah.
And I started to come to this realization, or at least this belief, that people preferred being around the version of me that was drinking. And that was a hard lesson to be instilled in me back then, because that then perpetuated well into my 20s and even to my early 30s, where I would often drink and use the excuse to drink to connect with others. Meanwhile, building a business, meeting my wife, having her first 2 daughters, you know, I only have 2 daughters, so having her 2 daughters, you know, and you know, the business was growing. But at the same time, I was managing a lot of these negative emotions with alcohol until I couldn't. And that's where the TEDx talk comes in. It talks about that moment when my wife basically sat me down, like my dad and mom sat me down when I was 15 to say, you know what, we're calling it quits. Well, Christy sat me down and she's like, this is not an environment we're going to raise the girls in. This is not acceptable. And fair enough, you know, she put up with me and tolerated me for almost a decade at that point. And the thing was, I knew I couldn't defend myself. I there was nothing I could say, because she was right. And she asked me a question. And this is the question that changed everything. Dai, are you being the type of man you would want your daughters to marry? And it was in that moment, it was like, again, instant clarity. I was like, no, I'm not being that guy. And actually, if a guy like me showed up on my doorstep wanting to get close to the 3 most important women in my life, I wouldn't let them in the house. Meanwhile, that's what I was modeling, and that's how I was mentoring people around me, professionally and personally, because, you know, I'm a man of action, and my actions were not matching up to the type of person that I always portrayed myself as. So there's a disconnect, right? And that's where a lot of those negative emotions and thoughts and perspectives of ourselves come in, because we say we're this, and then we keep doing something different.
Like cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. I wasn't going to throw that term in there, but thank you. That was awesome. That was good. That was great. I was like, man, most people don't know that. That was awesome. Exactly. Cognitive dissonance. And which is interesting because it shows up all the time for us. All the time. And so I made a decision. I want to be a man of integrity. I want to say what I do and do what I say. And I realized it's going to be a lot of work. But I removed the alcohol, committed to 1 year with no drinking. Everything changed in that year. So much so that at the end of the year, my wife and I are looking at each other and she's like, wow, I can't believe you did a year. And I'm like, I can't believe I did a year. What if I kept going? And so I just celebrated 15 years since my last drink, And, yeah, thank you.
That's the high fives here today.
Yeah. And, but everything changed after that, the book came shortly after that. I was inspired, because all of a sudden I'm saving money. I'm not dropping all that money on alcohol. I'm gaining 2 or 3 extra days, typically a week, because I'd have 2 or 3 non-productive days based on the drinking. And I also found myself just having so much more energy and focus. Everything happened, like so quickly, to the point where I outgrew the position I was in. I didn't want to be there anymore either. And that's scary, right? Late 30s, and I'm thinking like, oh yeah, there's a company I co-founded. I figured this is my trajectory for life. But then I started to feel not connected to the work anymore. I wanted something more.
It's almost like your intuition, like your inner voice or higher power, whatever you want to call it, your higher self. Like for me, it's like I'm in my 10th year now. We'll be 10 consecutive in September.
Amazing.
And that's exactly like so much of your story of what you're sharing. Like, I'm not a dude, or I didn't go through that exact thing of what you went through. But the thing about social acceptance, like I was 17 when I moved to Canada. My first drink was at 18 or 18 and a half. And, the sense of like, I'm one of the in people, because I was bullied a bit in high school, and then afterwards, like in work environment, and then that journey, and then like I still created and did a lot of stuff, like interestingly was blessed to do so. But afterwards, when the decision came in my, like I was 30, 31, I couldn't believe how long the days were. I was like, the days are so long,
It's awesome.
And it was the same thing of the cognitive dissonance of I have an idea inside of me, morally, the type of person that I want to be, how I am showing up and on time and so many things, versus like where I was at. And I think it's just this little thing that's made such a difference in my life. Like if I could go back in time and say to that 30 or 29-year-old, the pain that you were in, that and where you're gonna be in 10 years, I'd be like, there's no way. Like, there's no way I would have imagined you would move to a country without speaking the language, like France, and like being. It's just almost like the little thing, man, that made such a difference, and it's so amazing to see. And then you go on to author this book, which I feel is another thing. Like, I can't believe we had all these similarities, and I'm on your Instagram page, and I'm like listening to your talk. I'm brushing my teeth, putting on my nightly serum, and I'm like, okay, let me like get to know a bit more about and listening to your podcast. It's like, wow, I had no idea. And just seeing you on that stage and like owning your truth, and I feel like that's what we need to hear and see more of as well, is the little changes and how we can, do those acts of self-esteem, because self-esteem is built through those little shifts.
You're right. Yes. Well, clarity breeds confidence. And when we feel confident, we take more decisive action. Intentional, decisive action. There's less procrastinating. But if you think about it, if we're not clear on what we're doing or why we want to do something, well, it doesn't make us feel very confident, because we're always going to second guess, well, why am I doing this? Is it the right thing I should be doing? We start to go into that analysis paralysis place, and we'll do anything but the actual thing that we set out to do. And so I just encourage people, get the clarity first. Ask yourself some good questions. Like if there's something that you want to change, the best question to ask yourself first, can I do this? Like, can I do this being the change? Like me as a 15-year-old morbidly obese teenager, can I get healthy? Like that was seriously a question I was thinking about. Can I get healthy? And and what this does is it shines a big spotlight in an area in your life where you're going to recognize maybe I just don't have the knowledge I need. Because by asking myself that question, well, can I get healthy? I was like, well, I don't really know yet. Why couldn't I get healthy? And then you start to realize and go through this sort of assessment process. And eventually you're going to get to a place and say, well, other people are getting healthy. I can get healthy too. Yeah, I can do this. I can get healthy. And then you got to ask question 2. Is it worth it? Or more importantly, before question, let's do question 2. We're going to say, if I do it, will it work? Because how many times have we had experiences where we've decided to make a change? We start to do the little things. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, I'm not seeing progress. I'm not feeling like I'm getting results. And instead of pushing through or adapting, sometimes we quit. We just stop. And this start, stop is a real pattern for a lot of individuals. Me too. I've been there, okay? And I know how frustrating it can be, especially when it comes to that way that you think about yourself. And so you have to ask yourself, well, if I start to do the little things, will I actually get healthier? And for me, it was just like, well, listen, if I start riding my bike, I change what I'm eating, I think that's going to start to make me healthier.
And then when you start seeing the results, like
yes.
Yes. And like honestly, no joke, when I decided, and I'm doing it more as a mental discipline.
Yeah, good.
And inner shift for energy, because being self-employed, being entrepreneur, artist, so much of the game, like I was saying, it's this. Like, how am I showing up when I have the Zoom call with you, when I'm not feeling perhaps, or my day isn't going extraordinary? What can I do for me, you know? And when those days happen, I'm like, when I'm lifting, like I used to teach yoga, but I enjoyed that as well. But there's something about like lifting weights or like going up 50 floors or doing something that's a little bit like, and I'm sweating and I'm not thinking.
Yes.
The monkey mind stops, or the inner critic for a second, is that volume is turned down.
Correct.
Because I do believe we all have that.
Yeah.
And so you decide then to leave this company that's doing so well, Fitness Town. I can even imagine the logo right now. And you're sober now. You stop drinking, and now you decide to write this book. So tell us about your book.
Yeah, I started writing it, I guess, about a year before I left the company. So I already knew, I gave lots of notice that I'd be leaving. Because, being in a fairly integral position, it made sense to leave well.
Yeah, and did you know what path you were going to be on?
Not 100%, I just knew it wasn't there anymore. And I think that's, I think back on it, I'm like, oh, that's kind of crazy. Because we didn't necessarily know the path that we wanted to be on. We just knew the one that we were on currently wasn't the one for us. And I'm talking, my wife and I, we talked about this. We really wanted to get clear what was the kind of life we wanted to have as a family. And as we started to address those questions, we realized, well, my wife always had a passion to travel. And when we first met, she actually gave up her traveling to settle down with me, because I was getting into my career at the time, and, our relationship was solidifying, and she came back from a year away early so we could be together. And sure enough, we've been together now for 23 years. But back then, she gave up her travel, but she always said, I'd love to travel with a family one day when we have kids. And I was like, okay. And that perpetuated. She kept, reminding me of that.
And you guys were away during COVID, right?
Yeah, we came back right before COVID.
Okay.
But from 2015 to 2020, those 5 years after we left the company, the book was published. And at the same time, we're like, you know what? Why don't we go traveling? So we downsized our lifestyle. What I mean by that, Vancouver's not a cheap town. So we subletted our place out, got rid of a vehicle. We put one vehicle in storage, gave away a lot of our stuff. What we didn't want to give away, those sentimental things, we put into a storage unit. And then we just packed up the back of the SUV and we just started going south. We really had no idea where we were going.
I love that.
It's crazy.
I honestly love that so much.
Well, I think back on it, it was so exciting, but also at the same time a bit nerve-wracking because we didn't really have any intentions other than we were just going to go traveling. We're going to chase the sun. Because it was also January 2015.
You're also probably feeling very alive. Like
we were. Oh,
okay.
man. We were. Totally.
By the age of 7, we'd lived in 7 different countries.
What?
Yes.
That's crazy.
So
Crazy.
the sense of adventure and all of that, and you know, when I was in France, like my life was like Africa, Asia, like Europe, everywhere, just you know, and coming back here and being like, I literally came back end of January 2020, and just being here, and I was like, I've been just doing so much suitcase packing, airports, planes, trains, automobiles, that just to be here was like, oh my God.
But it's nice to all of a sudden have a place to just settle for a little bit, you know?
And I didn't recognize how much my nervous system needed the rest. My nervous system, like I like both of those, so I can completely understand, because I think I saw on social media you guys, and there's another designer I know, Nicole Bridger, who moved to Bali, and like so many other people who are making these changes in their lives, and I'm like, and there's something, of course, it makes you, it's nerve-wracking, and you don't know what's happening, but your senses are awakened.
They really are. Well, they have, and I guess I shouldn't say they have to, but they will. They just will, because all of a sudden you start to remove one thing, now you're adding in a whole world of possibility. You can't help but feel very creative in that moment, you know, like, and also free, you know, and even though we didn't really have the money thing figured out 100%, you know, I didn't like leave my company and exit out with a massive buyout. Like it was actually a bit of a down market at the time. So, but it's all good. I'm all right with it. Like I wanted out, you know, but I also knew, my wife and I, we had had conversations. We knew we were both very employable. So worst case scenario, you know, if entrepreneurship doesn't work out, we'll go get a job. Sure enough, though, we did all right, and I had transitioned a lot of the things I was doing, the coaching and whatnot, to it online. Started doing a lot more speaking, you know, started working with other brands, existing companies, consulting, helping people really do amazing things offline that want to do things online. So I helped with that transition.
So let's talk about that, because I'm sure like someone like myself, even though I'm not in the fitness sphere, but I'm sure there's a lot of principles that you've learned, you know, because it's quite extraordinary, like the story of, you know, being comfortable in this space and then deciding, you know what, I'm just gonna throw a wrench in there. I'm just gonna like, but I can understand and relate so much, because those are the moments that make us feel so alive, and that's when the creative juices flow. And you're kind of in touch with the universe, and the right people and situations and places come up. And I'm sure our audience, a lot of artists and entrepreneurs and artists watching the show, tell us a little bit about your coaching, because not only, you're not just working with people in the fitness sphere, like you work with business leaders, you know, people ask you to come and speak, you speak at conferences, you've been on a lot of TV shows across Canada.
Yeah, well, I guess when I made that transition, I really accepted that I'm someone that I get a lot of fulfillment from helping others optimize their lifestyle. You know, because our lifestyles are just basically whatever makes up our life. You know, I'm just sort of dumbing down the explanation here, but you know, everything that you do in your given life is your lifestyle. You know, some of the things that we do maybe don't serve us as well as other things. You know what I mean? Like maybe late night drinks is counterproductive to some of the goals that you have. And I'm not saying give up alcohol. I'm not here to vilify alcohol. It's a personal choice.
Yeah, completely.
But if there's certain things that you're doing, and you're doing often enough that it's having a negative repercussion on other areas of your life that you want to see improve, you have to ask yourself, well, what's worth it? You know, is it worth it maintaining this lifestyle as is because you have social commitments or a certain idea that you have to be certain social, you know, acceptance, etc. You know, there's certain pressure there. But we have to say, you know, enough of the external pressure, let's look at for the internal pressure. And you were speaking this earlier when you were talking about challenging yourself to do hard things. We all are capable of doing hard things.
And that's what's also going to make us feel alive, and you know, coming back to self-esteem, it builds that self-esteem and the inner resilience of like, I can do this. I can do something that is difficult. And
Yes.
and then what is the worst? What's the worst that's gonna happen? Like, I know I keep talking about Paris,
That's good.
but I remember, like, I made the decision very quick. I feel like that's another thing. Like, when I make a decision, like, for me, it has to be kind
awesome.
of, if I start overthinking,
Yeah.
like, overthinking is not, nothing's gonna get done. I booked my ticket, my flight, my apartment, all in one day. After 1 month, I was visiting Paris.
Nice.
And then within a few months, I moved. Like, I started selling everything. But after I booked it, I had, like, kind of a little bit of a meltdown at 2 in the morning.
Oh, no.
I was like, what am I doing? Like, things are peaceful and content in Vancouver. Why do I need to challenge myself? But I just knew the work opportunities and everything
Yes.
will come. And a month later, I have a book contract. I'm ghostwriting a book, and you know, the magazines and media folks in New York and LA are like, yeah, we would love for you to be a correspondent and do this. Did I have that figured out? No, I didn't.
That's okay though.
Like, I had to close one door like you did.
Yes.
And then things came.
But you also trusted yourself enough that you have that ability to adapt and to be resilient. You know, like it's you see, we're all resilient. Every single, like, I've met people like, I don't feel very resilient. I'm like, well, you are though. Your DNA says so. You're part of this human species, you know, and the human condition. Yeah, we're born into this planet. We do a bunch of stuff, and then we leave the planet, and then we go off to that next journey. You know, but there's a lot of stuff that happens in between, right? And we decide a lot of the time what we want to do in between. And we all are capable of adapting to hard situations. You know, Buddha, I think 2,500 years ago, he's like, listen, I don't know much, but I do know one thing for certain. Nothing stays as it is. You know, we often hear him refer to this too shall pass, right? Well, he wasn't just talking about the hard stuff in our lives.
The good stuff too.
He's talking about the great stuff. So slowing down to pay attention to everything that's happening in your life and being just aware is a great place to start. But meditation, I know, is challenging for a lot of folks. It's been hard for me too. It doesn't mean you stop trying. It just means maybe you haven't found the right style yet. And there's so many of them. You know, just get the free app, Insight Timer. I mean, there's like 1,000,001 different meditations on there, different instructors, you know, that guided or not guided, and there's one for you. Trust me, there's one for you. But this is a great way of calming that monkey mind and becoming more present to your own life, your own situation, feeling into your own body. And just 5 minutes a day. That's it. You know, it's a good place to start.
I love that.
Yeah.
I will do it at the end of my day.
Nice.
But I certainly find whether it is my 5-minute journal or my 3 pages of artist way journaling, either of which, being honest, I haven't done them today because we had a very early start and my little 2 fur babies gotta feed me. We gotta do number 1, number 2, and you know, the whole. Anyways, I want to talk a little bit about how you coach. You know, you work with folks in the fitness industry, but also you work with business leaders and entrepreneurs in that realm. And you used the word earlier, like optimizing your life. And we had a great conversation, which I thought was going to be 10-15 minutes long. Next thing I know, we're speaking for an hour. And I couldn't believe how fast the time went by. So I want to talk a bit about that. What does if I'm coming to Dai and I'm like, hey Dai, this is January, we're in the beginning of the year, it's 2024. I kind of have an idea of where I want to be by the time my birthday comes in summertime or at the end of the year, but I'm not so great at XYZ. I'm great at the creative, not so great on my personal relationship side. That's, I'm being honest. You know, I'm great at doing the work. This work is one part of my life is very busy. Other aspect, I'm like, it's just on the back burner. I don't know if I have time for that. I'm just like, but making a decision, because I think everything in life is a choice.
Yes, you're right.
You know, like what kind of soup are you making? You know, whatever I'm giving my energy to, that is what I'm gonna get more return on. You know, if I'm not focusing on one thing, whether it's fitness, my personal or my social or whatever, you're not gonna get much out of that. So I want to hear when, for example, okay, I'm just speaking for me, selfishly. how do you start? Like, how do you work with someone?
Well, it always starts with a conversation,
Mm.
and the nice thing about conversation, if the right questions are asked, usually the right answers will present themselves.
Mm.
And when you say the right answer, you can also tell because your energy internally will shift, right? Like when you made the decision to go to Paris, sure,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of fear there, concern, but I bet you it was more fear of excitement.
There was a
you
lot
know?
of excitement
Yeah.
because I was just like, I'm going to be a person who not just talks about things. I'm
Yes.
a person who happens to things, who's out there.
Yes.
And I think when I was in my 20s, I was kind of around in my, having a lot of fun out there,
Yeah.
working in bars and whatnot. And I was around people who talk a lot of talk.
Right.
And it wasn't backed up. And as time has gone on, I have a good support system, but I've also recognized I have to have a lot of quiet time.
Yes.
I
Good.
need a lot of time alone to get in touch with what do I want? Who am I? Because at the end of the day, I am living with me,
Yes.
and I have to be happy with what is in here. Don't get me, I'm not a saint, but at the same time, I've recognized a lot of the outside chatter and what other people's goals are. I have to tune it down because I'm the kind of person who's easily influenced by the people I'm around. So not only do I have to be mindful with who I am sharing time with, like, anything from
Yes.
personal relationship to friendships, but also I need the time to myself to be like, is this in alignment?
Yes.
Because I'm so easily influenced. I know maybe some people are more stronger and in tune with themselves and other people's goals don't affect them or their view on life doesn't affect them. But I've recognized over time that if I have a friend who has very firm beliefs about XYZ, pretty soon I'll be like, oh yeah. I mean, it's good to get inspired, but who am I? What do I want?
Yes.
What are my values?
And you are really the architect of your life. I mean, at the end of the day, you design the life that you want. Now, of course, there might come a point where you want to share that life with somebody else, and then you'll be, sharing that architect position, meaning that you want to co-create together now, but not codepend. And there's a difference, right? And like I often refer to the term co-committed versus codependent. We hear a lot about this idea of codependent, which is a big reason why some couples, end up breaking up, but also maybe staying together for the wrong reasons. You become so dependent on one another that you can't imagine a life without the other person, even though it might be a very toxic relationship. I won't get into all the relationship talk right now, but I know a lot of people that come to me, we start to have these types of questions, start to ask them those big questions. And a lot of time people are just like, I don't know. Because they don't remember the last time they even asked themselves that question, thought about that. Like, what do I want? What do I want for my life? Like I see a lot of these very well-to-do professionals, right? Men and women alike, that have been so focused on career. Right? So focused. Well, it's okay. But that it's created disharmony in other areas, right? And again, you get great fulfillment. You're a creator. You also work as an extrovert, which makes sense that you want some quiet time. I'm the same way. I choose to be an extrovert, but I'm naturally more introverted. So it takes me a little bit longer to recover. I had to learn that about myself. It's why you were probably also getting sick there week after week. You have this max exertion and the immune system.
Literally, and I was like, dude, there would be weekends, like it's summertime, I have a patio, a big patio, and I have a patio couch. I did not want to go to the beach because I'm just laying in there.
Perfect.
I don't want to deal other than watching my dog. And I found it was very interesting, and I was speaking to a friend, mentor of mine who used to work at the UN, and I did some work in that realm as well for a little bit, freelance. And she kind of said to me, she's like, as our rock stars deal with this a lot because you're not that I'm saying that I'm one, but it's like you have this audience you're on at 100,000%. Full wattage, like full pump it up.
That's right.
And then I would have this. I don't do anything, but it's like I would have a big come down because we were filming in my home. Everyone would come here. I'm fully dialed up, like literally so much gratitude for what I'm doing, and then these feelings that would come on, and I'm like, what is this? And one of the advice that she gave me, you got to pull yourself back a little bit. Don't give so much.
Yes.
And I just didn't really know. I'm like, but I'm a performer. I'm an artist. Like
Pacing,
I'm doing my
pacing. Right. It's finding that natural pace, but also recognizing
I want to say balance, but I'm like harmony.
No, but you're right. But that harmony, you're trying to create a tune, right?
But keeping some of that for yourself.
Yes.
Of like, I guess it's an inner boundary.
Yes.
It's an inner, like showing up without. Yeah, it's something that I've had to learn to find and fine tune within myself.
But at least you're looking for it.
Yeah. And
I think by the time people usually show up to work with me, they've gotten so exhausted looking for it. You know, they're at the place where they're like, the more I look, the more confused I get, the more choices I'm presented with, and nothing feels right.
Yeah.
And it's also, and I have to be honest, like a lot of people that come to me, we got to get the health in check first. You know, because if you're very career focused, this happens a lot in people, like it's career, you probably have not been focusing on your own health and well-being, your mental health, your emotional health, especially your physical health. And I find that energy starts to, well, let's just say it shifts.
Yeah.
And it might not be in the most productive place that it could be. And so we have to sort of have a nice reset. Let's get you physically to a good place where you're just getting up in the morning, you feel good. You feel like you actually had a full night's sleep. You don't have any aches or pains. You feel like, you know what? I gotta go tackle my day today.
Yeah.
You know, like the first thing you do in the day is get up out of bed. When you get out of bed, is it like an IOC committee member there saying, oh, gold medal, right? Like, seriously, like, it's an opportunity, it's a choice. Yeah. Start your day like that. Get out of bed tomorrow morning. Pretend their IOC is right there on the couch, right? And they're watching and judging me on how I dismount my bed. But, like, you laugh at it. But, hey, I know tomorrow morning, when you do it, you're going to laugh. Yeah. You start your day with a chuckle. That's positive endorphins being released. You know, humor is so powerful. So powerful. It's also a wonderful motivator. You know, it really is. So tap into that. Have more fun. And that's actually the biggest thing that most people that come and work with me is trying to figure out how to get back to having fun and enjoying, again, enjoy life, right? And it's amazing how most of us just forget what it was like to be a kid. You know, like really.
And when it comes to like disease or any of that, it's so interesting. You're talking about laughing and the importance of that. Like lately I've been listening to this podcast, Smart Well, with like Will Arnett, Jason Bateman.
Smartless. Yes.
And they've become like my homies, like listening to them.
So
and
funny.
Dude, I'm just like when I'm doing doing my stairs or whatever, I'm just laughing. I'll be on the street. I'm just like laughing. And you don't need, I was saying this literally to a friend a week ago. I'm like, laughter is so important because we're so busy adulting and we think like the kid who thinks, you know, when you tell the kid, act like an adult, he's like scared and, you know, shoulders like this and dressing like this, versus what you said, more happiness. Like I loved, like when I was reading your bio, you know, it's like functional, like fun, capital.
Yes.
And the fact that, you know, what do you define fun as? I know we just have a couple more minutes left to go, and before I let you go, because I literally feels like we just got started. We're just dipping the toes in. I want to talk a little bit, especially this is January, beginning of the year, and I want to talk a bit. I do believe that you can do goal setting at any point. You know, it doesn't have to be January 1st.
That's right.
Like every day is a new beginning. You know, we can like start our day again at 12 p.m. or whatever we want. If you're having a bad day, take a nap and be like, okay, it's a brand new day. It doesn't need to happen on December 31st or January 1st. It can happen any time. But I do think there's something powerful about goal setting. You know, and when I was reading about you and finding that that's something you really work with clients on, not just physical, not just health, but like full spectrum. what advice would you give to our viewers who are at home that they can take home and implement in their lives today? What homework would you give to them? Or what homework would you give to me?
Well, I think, one of the best places to begin is how are you honoring your health? Like really honoring it. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing to honor yourself? Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about self-care. We're talking about self-health, right? Because, I mean, as much as I've been looking for a career, by the way, if there's anybody out there and you'll pay me to work out, I'm there. Okay? Like, I haven't found one of those jobs yet. Okay? Like, and most companies are not going to pay for self-care. But mind you, there's a shift happening. It's a bit of a pendulum shift, especially around the mental well-being and mental health conversation. Seeing a lot of workplaces now reinvesting and putting better resources to support their teams and their company. But we can't rely on other people for our own health. It's something that we got to be self-accountable to. So I like to invite people, at the very least, look at the things that you do on the day-to-day that move you forward. Because for you to go after any goal in life, you need the energy, you need the focus. Because without those two things, forget about it. It's going to be a struggle. You're going to hit the wall one day and be like, "Whoa, I'm just going to quit." Why? And it's not happening. And that negative mental patterning will take over. So that's why I always say start with something that builds confidence as well as clarity. I invite people, start with a green smoothie every morning. Super simple, easy to do. You do it for 1 week straight, trust me, you're going to miss it come day 8 and you will want to do it. It's just a great way to start your body by infusing a lot of deep nutrition into every cell in your body. After that, I encourage people, either you start with an early morning walk, try to get some natural light. If that's not available, because you live in the West Coast like us, and sometimes the months is still great, you can still get outside for a walk. But I encourage people to try to do a 30-minute walk.
If you have a dog,
yes,
you have no
excuse. You're going out. But even just a quick 30-minute walk while listening to something positive. Okay, like you can listen to one of your great interviews, right? You can listen to a fun podcast. You can listen to a TED Talk, right? There we go. But what I'm saying here is you're infusing positive messages into your mind. It's a muscle between your ears that needs to be developed. It needs to be worked out.
What
so
are you
feed it.
I want to know, what are you listening to right now?
I'm
reading.
Okay, so I had a few on the go. I started, and this is full disclosure. Last year on my birthday decided that I was going to try by the time I'm 50 to read the top 100 books of literature in history. It's quite the list. Fortunately for me, I've read a bunch of them because I went to school for English Lit, so I got a little bit of a head start. But I've been slowly picking away. So I just finished Catcher in the Rye, a reread from my high school, which I loved it. A completely different understanding of that book in context than when I was a teenager reading in high school. Definitely worth the read if J.D. Salinger, if you're wondering. So that's when I just finished. And so I've got a couple others I'm about to start, but I've been getting back into fiction, and I've actually really been enjoying it because I've done so much personal and professional development, read so many of those self-help books, to the point that I stopped reading them. They sit on my shelf. It's now shelf help, not self-help, okay? So it just sits there. So I'm on a fiction kick right now.
I love that. I'm really into biographies right now.
Oh, cool. Which one?
Yeah. I really enjoyed Pamela Anderson's.
Oh, I've heard really good things about that.
I really highly, and I've recommended it to several people. Truly enjoyed it. I also finished Prince Harry's.
Oh.
I'm on Michael J. Fox right now.
I've heard Michael J. Fox is also a great one.
Yeah.
I heard it's just awesome.
Yeah.
Did you read Green Lights?
I did.
So good.
So
I did it twice.
Okay,
I couldn't help it.
I'll probably listen to it. He's so entertaining.
Oh my gosh.
His whole vibe. Like, and I think both of them as a couple. And
yes.
I was listening to Matthew on Smart Plus as well.
Yes, he was so good on that. The first time?
Yeah, I couldn't find that one, but I was listening to the second one, and I think there's just something about, and also Matthew Perry's.
Oh, okay.
So my December was all biographies,
There's some really big hitters there too. Some big books.
So I find it very fascinating, like listening, because same as you, I've had the shelf help as well. And, and my little stack over here on my night tables, they both have books, bathroom full of books, all the books here. And this is a quarter of what I used to have. I used to have like a huge library. But I think I enjoy listening to other people's stories and having conversations like this
Yes.
where I can learn, oh, this is how you overcame that. Oh, you have the same fear as me. Oh, you have the same past, openly, vulnerably sharing your story. And all I could think was, I'm like, man, this is probably inspiring and helping so many men.
Hoping.
Yeah.
Hoping. And to understand, you know, and I know we're pretty much out of time, but this idea of vulnerability is really important to me. And you know, being a father of two daughters, I knew that I wanted to be able to connect with them on a different level, to be able to have the hard conversations and not shy away or run away from those. That was my dad, you know, and I think it's just that intentionality of like, because my dad he did as best he could, but he was a different generation. I mean, he told me, I remember this vividly. I remember him telling me that he only remembered his parents telling him they love him on 2 occasions. In his entire life, you know, he lived into the 70s. Can you imagine only hearing from your parents twice that they love you? So, you know, this idea of vulnerability, it is a skill that anyone can develop. And I don't mean you be vulnerable for the sake of being vulnerable, right? It's to create deeper connection and understanding. But what you just said, I hope everyone took note, you know, you have these conversations with somebody, someone opens up a bit, and you're like, gosh, me too.
Yeah.
Like, if we didn't get to that place, I mean, we sit here by ourselves thinking no one understands the pain I'm in. No one understands all the challenges I'm dealing with, right? And all of a sudden you open up, you start talking about it, and it's like 10 people put up their hands, oh, me too. You know, I dealt with that last week, here's what I did. You know, mentorship, modeling, like it's incredible. So vulnerability is a key and a way into that.
I love that. And I think that's another reason why, you know, like the work that you're doing is so important, and also there's so many, that's why the success of 12-step programs,
Yes,
you
correct.
know, support, community, the fact that you're not alone, but anything like martial arts, like as you and Julian were talking earlier, I found since I got a dog, there's like a dog community that I automatically entered, you know, like all of a sudden, like, you know, people give you advice and help and support. I'm so blessed, like in my building, like people want to help. But it's asking for help.
Yes.
And so many times it's the ego and pride that wants to be like, no, you don't need to. And I think that's also a big lesson for me over the last decade, but I really started using that muscle even more because something inside of my brain was, what is the worst? They're gonna say no.
That's right.
Like even in my friend group, whether to go for a hike or asking for help with my dog or whatever, like what's the worst?
Yeah.
And I think especially today's day and age, you know, the HELP, those 4 magic words are just so important. Before we let you go, any parting words that you would like to share with our audience?
You know, it's kind of funny because this is something that was shared long ago, but we sort of hinted at it earlier. You know, Buddha 2,500 years ago, there's nothing guaranteed in this world, in this life of ours, other than nothing stays the same, right? And he talks about this, the universe just being, the law of change is that everything's always in flux. When we find ourselves resistant to that, like fighting change, it's hard. Because it's going to happen whether we like it or not sometimes. But sometimes we can be proactive with change. Like at 15, I was very proactive with my change. At 32, when I said no to alcohol, I chose to say no to alcohol. You know, again, I was saying yes to change, but I had to say no to something to allow for that change to happen. As much as Buddha talked about this 2,500 years ago, in the last 100 years ago, science caught up. Law of entropy, right? Everything is in a state of flux. This is mostly air. You know, mostly space between the molecules. And everything isn't changing. So don't worry about it. It's okay. You know, and Buddha did say this too shall pass. And everyone associates that he was talking about the hard stuff in life. But he was talking about the great stuff too. So pay attention to the great stuff. Be mindful of the great stuff. Be present for the great stuff. Because that's where the real life and all that harmony can be created, is in life right now. You know, you don't have to wait till tomorrow. You don't have to wait till after lunch.
Or January 1st.
Or January 1st. You know, you
can
can just start right away. Just start with something small. Just something small.
Yeah.
Because that's going to build that confidence and that confidence and that feel-good emotion inside you to want to take another step and another one and another one. And if you don't have that for yourself, find a community. Find a community to belong to. Because there'll be other people there that when you fall, they're going to pick you up. But you're also going to pick other people up.
And I know we're almost out of time here,
Yeah.
but you also coach individuals, like one-on-one, on a one-on-one basis. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, everything starts with a conversation. I work in both the business field based on my business background, but I don't market myself as a business coach or consultant. But people that know my background, they reach out and they're like, hey, can you help me? And I'm like, ah, sure, why not? You know, I like helping people. So, but the stuff that gets me really excited is working with individuals that realize that life might feel a little sticky. You know, just a little sticky. Things aren't moving smoothly because there's usually one or two things that are snagging. I love helping those individuals because they're already performing really well. But you get those two little snags and you free those up, watch out. Because those are the people that just all of a sudden, and also I don't need to work with them very long. You know, it's usually like 3 to 6 months and then they're off doing their thing. And I like that. I prefer that. Like, I don't want to be a forever coach. You know, if I do my job, there should be a fixed period of time. You're ready to move on.
You're like teaching them to fly.
Well,
it's almost like
education.
parenting.
It's education. Like I'm a big proponent for education and wisdom. Self-wisdom is an application of education. You know, and so I will hold your hands, but I also know that sometimes people need a little bit more accountability or motivation. Size 12. When that connects with your butt, you get moving, okay? So no worries at all. I can help.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dai. I really appreciate
Thank you.
it.
It's been wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much for taking the time. And you know, if you're ready to get some help changing your life, transform your life. He's an author, co-founder of this amazing company, Fitness Town. He's a dad. He's dating his wife. They've been together for 23 years. He has a podcast. He's been interviewed on over 300 plus podcasts. And he is a life architect who can help inspire you in all aspects of your life. I'm so happy we did this.
Oh, so much fun. So great to reconnect.
Yeah, and now we're going to be doing this on a regular basis. You know,
and I got my podcast.
Yeah,
I'm here now.
Wonderful. I truly appreciate it, Dai. Thank you so much. My pleasure.